Zara Ellington clutched her boarding pass, the crisp cardstock a stark contrast to the fluttering in her stomach. New York shimmered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of LaGuardia's VIP lounge, a city built on dreams, and tonight, Zara's felt within reach. After 4 grueling years at Stanford, juggling late-night study sessions with the constant pressure to excel, she was finally heading home. Not just home to her family, but back to a city where success wasn't just a goal. It was a birthright, a relentless competition. The first-class ticket, a reward from her ever-supportive father, was more than just a seat upgrade. It was a symbol of her accomplishments. A bachelor's in economics with honors wasn't handed out easily. Zara had earned every credit, every late-night coffee, every sacrifice. It was all supposed to be the start of an exciting journey, and she just had one flight ahead of her. This should have been her happy and glorious day of being free from stress. But she knew it wouldn't happen that way. Zara knows that her complexion is often the subject of prejudice. It is often a silent judgment of what she is. As much as Zara tried to push to forward, as much as she succeeded, the higher-class society did not want her to belong. Zara's fight for this goal was even bigger, with all the barriers she has to go through. A smile tugged at her lips as she imagined her father's face. Victor Ellington wasn't just her dad. He was her role model, her anchor. He built his tech empire from the ground up, a beacon of innovation in a city that devoured the complacent. Tonight, she wasn't just returning as his daughter. She was returning as his equal, ready to contribute her skills and ambition to the Ellington legacy. Zara glanced around the lounge. Mostly older, white men in expensive suits were engrossed in their tablets. She couldn't see herself fitting in with that community. The constant anxiety and the fear of never catching up always consumed her. She felt out of place. In fact, she has always felt out of place. People would judge her for her skin complexion, for her background, her clothes, and her money, but no one could ever get close to her to know what is inside her mind. It was not that Zara was sad, but just frustrated and tired. Tired of all the struggle in this world. Tired of not being able to get close to anyone. When she was at school, she was always the loner. She was not antisocial but rather anti-human. She knows if she gets close with someone she may get hurt again. A young black man was also sitting down at the corner, who felt quite similar, and Zara wanted to reach out and say hi. But she didn't, since it wasn't important to build connections with him. She had to go back home and give the company something back. Suddenly, a flight announcement cut through the lounge's hushed murmur. A call to board Flight 347 to Miami, her flight. Zara took a deep breath, smoothed down her charcoal gray blazer, and hoisted her designer handbag over her shoulder. This was it. Time to leave her school and go back to her real home. Zara Ellington was on her way home. On her way to make more money. In a time when people can finally look forward to what is going to happen. At least that is what she was hoping for. It was always better to be prepared than to be sorry. It was an exciting night for Zara, and a fresh start to create better memories, however it may not turn out to be. The air in the first-class cabin hummed with quiet affluence. Soft instrumental jazz barely masked the clinking of crystal glasses and the rustle of expensively tailored fabrics. As Zara stepped aboard, a subtle shift seemed to ripple through the space, a current of silent assessment flowing her way. "Welcome aboard, miss." The flight attendant, a blonde woman in her late 30s with a practiced smile and a name tag that read Claudia, paused almost imperceptibly, her eyes flicking from Zara's face to her boarding pass and back again. The pause, barely a fraction of a second, felt like an eternity. It said, "Do you really belong here?" She had a feeling that was so condescending, and felt that the first-class section only belongs to the fair-skinned people. "Ellington," Zara supplied, her voice calm but with an underlying edge. "Zara Ellington." Claudia's smile widened, but didn't quite reach her eyes. "Right this way." "Right this way." Her tone, though outwardly polite, lacked a certain warmth, the kind she'd lavished on the elderly gentleman who had boarded just ahead of Zara, offering him a complimentary newspaper and inquiring about his connecting flight. "Can I hang that bag for you?" Claudia asked, but she said it as if Zara would not even dare hand the bag to her. As Zara settled into her plush, leather seat, a middle-aged woman across the aisle gave her a brief, appraising glance. Her eyes lingered a moment too long on Zara's simple, elegant dress, as if scrutinizing its authenticity, before returning to her laptop, A dismissive flick of her wrist. Claudia, meanwhile, moved with practiced efficiency, offering pre-flight beverages. "Champagne, sir?" she asked the man beside Zara, her voice lilting with charm. To Zara, she offered only a curt water or juice. No smile, no eye contact. It was a subtle difference, but it spoke volumes. "Water, please," Zara replied, fighting back a surge of irritation. As Claudia moved away, another flight attendant, a younger man with a nervous demeanor, approached her. "Everything okay, Claudia?" he murmured, his eyes darting towards Zara. Claudia's smile tightened. "Just ensuring our standards are upheld," she replied, her voice low, but carrying a sharp edge. "Some people seem to think first class is some kind of free-for-all." The young man's eyes widened. "Of course, Claudia. Just let me know if you need anything." He scurried away, clearly eager to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Claudia watched him go, a flicker of something akin to weariness crossing her face. She felt trapped in her role, obligated to maintain the perceived exclusivity of first class. The airline's success, she believed, rested on upholding certain standards, and those standards, whether she consciously admitted it or not, were often shaped by ingrained prejudices. Claudia's action says a lot on what she thinks of colored people, as she has given in to what the community has wanted her to be. It was a sad realization, but she was still on the bad side of what is right. Zara, meanwhile, observed the interactions, the subtle cues and unspoken judgments. It was a familiar dance, one she'd navigated countless times before. She knew she belonged in this seat, had earned the right to be here, but the weight of others' expectations, their subtle attempts to define her, still stung. She made a mental note to discuss her experience and learn how to use her success for something good. Maybe she can stop what is happening. Tonight may be the start of a fight. The boarding process was nearly complete. Passengers were settling in, the overhead bins were being crammed shut, and the pre-flight safety demonstration played silently on the monitors. Claudia, with her practiced efficiency, made her final sweep of the cabin, ensuring everyone was comfortable before takeoff. As she approached Zara's row, she paused, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Zara, engrossed in a book, looked up, a polite smile gracing her lips. "Excuse me, Miss Ellington," Claudia said, her tone cool but outwardly professional. "There seems to be a slight discrepancy with your boarding pass." Zara blinked, her smile faltering. "Discrepancy? I don't understand. It's a first-class ticket." She held up the pass, the gold lettering gleaming under the cabin lights. Claudia didn't take the pass. "Yes, I see that, but our system is showing this seat as occupied. Could you please wait in the aisle for a moment while I verify?" A wave of heat flushed Zara's cheeks. "Wait in the aisle? With all these people staring?" Her voice remained calm, but a steely edge had crept in. "I have a seat booked. There should not be any issue with that." Claudia's smile tightened again. "I assure you, I'm simply trying to resolve a potential error. It happens from time to time. It would be much easier if you just waited out in the aisle, since you do not want the other passengers to wait." "I'd prefer to resolve it here," Zara replied, holding her ground. "Perhaps you could check your system again?" This was deliberate. She could feel it. It was more than a simple error. It was a challenge to her right to be here. Claudia sighed, a theatrical display of patience. "Very well." She tapped a few keys on her handheld device, her brow furrowed in concentration. But Zara could see the flicker of something else in her eyes, a satisfaction, as if she were relishing this small victory. After what felt like an eternity, Claudia looked up, her expression apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Miss Ellington, but it appears there's been a glitch. This seat is actually assigned to a Mr. Henderson, who is a very important frequent flyer, and he comes quite often to our airline. And you're telling me you didn't know?" Zara asked as her tone changed. There must have been a system error. "I can, however, offer you a seat in economy. It's not quite the same, but..." Claudia's voice trailed off, as if the difference between first class and economy was self-evident. "I see no point in this," Zara said back to Claudia. "This is pure prejudice." "This is nonsense and has nothing to do with you," Claudia replied. The passengers around them were now openly watching, their conversations hushed, their gazes curious and judgmental. Zara could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the subtle whispers and assumptions. Here comes someone that has to ruin the high-class reputation. I'm afraid I must insist, Claudia said, her voice taking on a firmer edge. If you don't comply, I'll have to call security. It was a clear threat, veiled in the language of protocol. She was tired of this behavior. Why she has to treat me like this? She had earned her seat, and she knew that she was not going to back down. Tonight had been enough. The walk to economy felt like a forced march through a gauntlet of stairs. Zara kept her head high, but the humiliation burned like acid on her skin. The whispers followed her, a low, insidious hum that amplified her shame. Did you see what happened? One voice murmured. She clearly didn't belong up there, another replied. As she reached the back of the plane, the contrast was stark. Cramped seats, stale air, and a general atmosphere of weariness replaced the spacious luxury of first class. The passengers here were a different breed, families with crying children, weary travelers with rumpled clothes, and the overlooked masses who kept the world running. Zara found her assigned seat, a cramped window spot near the lavatory. As she squeezed in, the woman next to her, a young Latina with tired eyes, offered a sympathetic smile. Rough flight, she asked, her voice low. You could say that, Zara replied, managing a weak smile in return. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken judgments. A few curious glances shot Zara's way, but most passengers seemed determined to ignore the spectacle. It was easier to look away, to pretend nothing had happened, to avoid the discomfort of acknowledging injustice. But Zara felt that she was doing something with her life from this point forward, and there was no turning back. A few rows ahead, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and a discerning gaze watched Zara. He jotted down a few notes in a small notebook, his expression thoughtful. He was David Sterling, a freelance journalist on assignment, and the scene he'd just witnessed had piqued his interest. They are not going to get away with it. I just have to go back and stop it. These people cannot get away with their crimes. The confines of the lavatory offered a temporary refuge from the prying eyes and stifled whispers. Zara locked the door, leaned against the cool metal wall, and finally allowed herself to breathe. The frustration, the humiliation, the simmering anger, it all threatened to boil over. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed a message to her father. They moved me to economy. The flight attendant claimed my seat was a mistake. But before she could hit send, a wave of self-doubt washed over her. What could her father even do? Cause a scene? Demand an apology? It wouldn't change the way Claudia and the other passengers perceived her. It wouldn't erase the sting of being judged and deemed unworthy. She deleted the message, a tear escaping her eye. The restroom then opened a crack. The flight attendant from business class walks over and says, "What is wrong? Are you okay?" Zara was shocked that someone would come to her assistance in a time when she felt alone. The flight attendant says, "Please, just tell me." Zara cries back and states, "She moved my seat, and my dad paid for the seats. I don't know what to do and feel like I cannot breathe. It's just that the pilot and the higher-end flights seem to look down upon what the lower class has and just disrespect us. And I hate that." Zara did not know that this would be the start to something great. The only way you can fix this is if you do well in life. To show these people that there is more than just money. "But I need to vent more," Zara cries back. "Don't worry, I am right here." The stewardess replies, "My name is Hannah, and I hope everything goes well for you. Stay strong, Miss Zara. And by the way, it is going to be a long ride, so stay as comfortable as you can." After Hannah left, Zara realized there may be more to the story than what it looks like. She goes back to her seat and she runs into David again. This time, David hands her a note. "I saw what happened, and I want to report it to the press. It is all wrong. No one should treat you like that. We are all equals and I hate seeing it." Zara reads the note and her heart feels warm, but weary to accept what is given. "Here is my card. Contact me if you decide to file a report," David says. Zara has hope once again to make things right. She gets back to her chair and has a new goal. The goal is to do well in life so that she can show people the truth to her. David Sterling watched Claudia as she meticulously adjusted a passenger's blanket, her smile strained. He'd seen the cracks in her facade, the barely concealed unease that flickered behind her eyes. He decided to observe her more closely. Later, He overheard a hushed conversation between Claudia and another flight attendant in the galley. "It's just the pressure, you know," Claudia whispered, her voice tight. "Mr. Henderson complained again that the wrong wine was served." Said it lowered the tone of the entire cabin. "You can't please everyone, Claudia," the other attendant replied, his voice sympathetic. "But it's my job too, isn't it?" Claudia snapped. "To maintain the image. That's what they expect." She looked exhausted, the weight of her responsibilities etched onto her face. David frowned, scribbling furiously in his notebook. It was becoming clear that Claudia wasn't simply acting out of malice. She was a product of a system that valued appearances over substance. A system that rewarded conformity and punished deviation. The system she did not want to break. Meanwhile, Zara, seated in the back, pulled out her laptop and opened her economics textbook. The noise of the economy section was not a distraction for Zara, as her goals are set in place. She would not let Claudia's actions stop her and put her down. David admired Zara's quiet resilience. Despite the humiliation she'd endured, she refused to let it define her. Instead, she channeled her energy into something productive, something that reaffirmed her worth. David knew there was a story here, a story that went far beyond a simple seating dispute. It was a story about prejudice, power, and the insidious ways that systemic inequality could warp even the most well-intentioned individuals. Hours into the flight, Zara pressed the call button above her seat. A small polite chime echoed through the cabin. Minutes passed, but no one came. She pressed it again, a hint of impatience creeping into her expression. Still nothing. Across the aisle, David Sterling watched with growing frustration. He'd been observing Claudia's behavior since the seating incident, and it was becoming increasingly clear that she was deliberately ignoring Zara. It was a slow, subtle form of harassment, designed to make Zara feel unwelcome and insignificant. Finally, Claudia appeared, her smile tight and insincere. "Yes?" she asked, her tone curt. "I requested a glass of water some time ago," Zara said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm still waiting." Claudia's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "I'm very busy at the moment," she replied, glancing pointedly at the other passengers. "I'll get to it when I can." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Zara parched and ignored. That was the last straw. David Sterling quietly pulled out his phone. Pretending to be engrossed in a game, he discreetly angled the camera towards Claudia and Zara. This wasn't just about documenting prejudice. It was about exposing a system that enabled such behavior. Minutes ticked by, and still no water. Zara sat stoically, refusing to give Claudia the satisfaction of seeing her frustration. She pulled out her laptop once again. David zooms into the laptop. He saw an economics essay about fixing social injustice with money. Zara really was going to change the world. With a final sigh, Claudia reluctantly approached Zara's seat. A plastic cup of water in her hand. She thrust it at Zara without a word, her expression radiating disdain. Seeing Zara act to not care, David takes that opportunity to finish recording, and puts away his phone. He knows what this will do for his career. This event will bring a message to the world, that being kind and generous can fix any social problem that is occurring. Zara took a sip of the water, her eyes meeting Claudia's. In that moment, there was no triumph, no anger, only a quiet understanding. The battle had been joined. Victor Ellington paced the floor of his private office, high above the city that bore his name. The phone felt heavy in his hand, the silence on the other end amplifying the turmoil within him. Zara's terse message: "They moved me to economy. The flight attendant claimed my seat was a mistake," replayed in his mind like a broken record. His first instinct was to unleash the full force of his power, to demand immediate consequences, to ensure that no one ever dared disrespect his daughter again. He could have the airline's PR team craft a carefully worded statement, issue a public apology, and quietly remove the offending flight attendant. The problem was Zara, a strong and independent woman, who did not need any sympathy from anyone. But Victor knew that wasn't the right answer. It wouldn't address the underlying problem, the subtle prejudices that permeated society, the ingrained biases that allowed someone like Claudia to feel justified in her actions. It was just Zara that would be victimized if he were to go that route. And there was another, more selfish consideration. Ellington Airlines was his legacy, his life's work. It was built on a foundation of innovation, customer service, and a carefully cultivated image of inclusivity. A public scandal, even one that painted him as a protective father, could damage the brand, erode customer trust, and undo years of hard work. With every decision he made, there was something to risk. So no matter what, Victor had to gamble it for his daughter. He looked at the photo of Zara on his desk. In that frame, Zara was happy to be the new student at school. The picture brought tears to his eyes as he realized he had failed to protect his daughter from experiencing what he also had to experience. He thought what was for the best for his daughter. This event would become a big scar to Zara, and he does not want this to happen. It was this thought that made him realize something must be done. There was no matter for debate. With a sigh, Victor made his decision. He wouldn't unleash his full power, but he wouldn't stand idly by either. He would use his influence, his resources, and his platform to address the underlying problem, to challenge the prejudices that had allowed this incident to occur. And above all, he would support Zara, empowering her to navigate this situation with strength and grace. He picked up the phone, his voice firm as he dialed the airline's operations center. It was time to make a call, one that would send ripples through the entire organization. Zara would not face that alone again. This time, it was something that she had no choice to make. He had to take action. Captain Robert Maxwell was a seasoned pilot, a man of steady nerves and unwavering professionalism. He'd weathered storms, navigated mechanical failures, and handled unruly passengers with equal aplomb. But the phone call he received mid-flight was unlike anything he had experienced in his 30 years of service. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, and undeniably authoritative. It was Victor Ellington, the owner of the airline, and he was not pleased. He did not raise a tone but instead kept it as professional as he could. "Captain Maxwell," Ellington said, his tone brooking no argument. "I've been informed of an incident involving my daughter Zara Ellington on your flight." Maxwell felt a cold dread creep into his heart. He knew Ellington Airlines prided itself on customer service, and he knew Ellington himself was a stickler for fairness and respect. This could not be good. "I understand there was a seating dispute," Ellington continued, his words carefully chosen, "and that Miss Ellington was relocated to economy class." Maxwell swallowed hard. He hadn't been directly involved in the incident, but he'd heard whispers, seen the knowing glances exchanged between the crew. He knew Claudia Harper, the head flight attendant, had been the one to handle the situation. "That is true, sir. I saw all of the documents and verified that every process was kept. However, the customers were very disappointed and made sure that it was kept at a status quo. I also understand that I could be at fault for the incident, but it was kept under wraps so that customers will be happy." "I see," Ellington replied, his voice deceptively mild. "Well, Captain, I want you to do something for me. I want you to personally ensure that Miss Ellington receives the best possible service for the remainder of the flight. And I want you to inform Miss Harper that I will be expecting a detailed explanation upon arrival." That wasn't all. In a tone that was like a stern warning, Captain Maxwell was to get ready to take flight. There was no time to waste and the job had to be done. What he was told to do, he had to. He was not to question the higher class. Maxwell hung up the phone, his mind racing. He knew Claudia. She was a dedicated employee, but she could also be unyielding in her adherence to protocol. He realized his boss was doing everything he could, and that it was his job to take action and stay in control. With a sigh, he paged Claudia to the cockpit. When she arrived, he greeted her with a grave expression. "Claudia," he said, his voice low, "I just received a call from Mr. Ellington." Claudia's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Mr. Ellington? What did he want?" Maxwell's expression hardened. "He's aware of the situation with Miss Ellington, and he's not happy." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He wants you to know that he expects a full explanation upon arrival, and he expects you to ensure that Miss Ellington receives nothing but the best for the remainder of this flight. In fact, let me inform you and ensure that she can have all the freedom she wants. No matter what it costs, it is what Mr. Ellington has asked. Claudia's face paled. Mr. Ellington knows. With the revelation, the entire structure toppled. The descent into Miami was turbulent, mirroring the storm raging within Claudia's mind. The captain's words echoed in her ears, each syllable a condemnation. Mr. Ellington knows. He expects a full explanation. She knew what that meant. Her career, her reputation, everything she had worked for, was now hanging in the balance. As the plane taxied to a stop, an unusual flurry of activity caught her attention. Ground crew were swarming the aircraft, and a sleek black SUV pulled up directly beside the boarding stairs. This was no ordinary arrival. The door to the SUV opened, and Victor Ellington stepped out, his presence radiating power and authority. Two impeccably dressed executives flanked him, their expressions grim. The message was clear. This was not a friendly visit. Claudia's heart pounded as she tried to compose herself, plastering on a semblance of her usual professional demeanor. As the passengers began to deplane, she saw Victor Ellington ascend the stairs, his gaze sweeping over the cabin, his face unreadable. "Now boarding is Mr. Ellington, welcome aboard. The flight attendant says he was here." He moved through the first-class cabin, acknowledging the passengers with a polite nod, but his focus was clearly elsewhere. His eyes scanned each row, searching, and then they landed on Zara, seated in the back of the plane. His expression softened, a wave of warmth washing over his face. He moved towards her, his stride purposeful. "Zara," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Are you all right?" Zara looked up, relief flooding her features. "Dad," she said, a faint smile gracing her lips. "I'm okay." He crouched beside her, taking her hand. "Are you sure? They didn't intimidate you, did they?" "I'm fine, Dad," Zara said, her voice gaining strength. "I handled it." Victor squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with pride. He straightened, his gaze hardening as he turned to face Claudia, who was standing frozen in the aisle, her face ashen. The moment of reckoning had arrived. "Miss Harper," Victor said, his voice clear and carrying. The entire cabin fell silent. "I understand there was an incident regarding my daughter's seating assignment," Claudia stammered, her words tumbling over each other. "Mr. Ellington, sir, I can explain. There was a misunderstanding. A system error." Victor raised a hand, cutting her off. "A misunderstanding that resulted in my daughter being forced to sit in the back of the plane?" His voice was dangerously calm. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the silent passengers. "This airline was built on the principles of respect, fairness, and equality," he continued, his voice gaining strength. We pride ourselves on treating every passenger with dignity, regardless of their background, their appearance, or the assumptions." He turned back to Claudia, his eyes unwavering. "Your actions today, Miss Harper, were a betrayal of those principles. They were unacceptable, and they will not be tolerated." As he said this, David pulls out his phone once again. This was a moment to capture, and he wanted to make sure he captured it. Claudia wilted under his gaze, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. I didn't realize," she stammered. "I was just trying to—" "Trying to what, Miss Harper?" Victor interrupted, his voice laced with steel. "Trying to uphold some misguided notion of standards? Trying to make my daughter feel unwelcome because she didn't fit your narrow definition of what a first-class passenger should look like?" With that, Victor signaled to the executives, who stepped forward. "Miss Harper," one of them said, his voice firm, "you are relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Please gather your belongings and accompany us." Claudia stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're firing me? Your services are no longer needed." As Claudia was escorted off the plane, a wave of murmurs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers gasped, some whispered, but most watched in stunned silence. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served, and Zara was now given the respect she deserves. The grainy video David Sterling posted on his blog that evening was a digital Molotov cocktail. It showed Zara Ellington being challenged about her boarding pass, being forced to walk to the back of the plane, and being pointedly ignored by the flight attendant. It ended with Victor Ellington confronting Claudia, his voice a low, controlled burn of righteous anger. Sterling's accompanying article, titled Unequal Skies, Discrimination in First Class, went viral within hours. He detailed Zara's achievements, her father's success story, and the subtle prejudices he'd witnessed during the flight. He painted Claudia not as a monster, but as a flawed product of a flawed system, a system that perpetuated inequality and rewarded conformity. The internet exploded. Twitter erupted with hashtags like #Ellington Airlines boycott and #Justice for Zara. Facebook groups dedicated to social justice buzzed with outrage. News outlets picked up the story, amplifying it to a global audience. Comments flooded in, a mix of support and condemnation. "This is disgusting. How can this still be happening in 2025? One comment read, "Why did she even need his dad to come up for help? Women must be more strong." While Victor Ellington was met with new challenges, it was his chance to prove his dedication to society. With the world's eyes on him, he had the opportunity to reshape not just his airline, but the conversation around race, class, and privilege. It looks like the media had to get in action with Zara's story. The world had found itself a new and popular victim to support. But the support was not always good for her. Every social issue now needed her. Even as she made a video with support to David, she still could not come to terms to what happened, and had to be assisted. There was a new pressure on Victor too. As the head of the airline, it was now his duty to prove that actions can be taken, and they will never be as serious. This was a major challenge for him. And even with Zara's success, the new problem was a large challenge as well. Victor found Hannah and tried to commend her. She was then a celebrity, as she was the flight attendant that consoled with her. With the press being so bad, he had to fire people as well. Firing them was his way of trying to keep everyone at balance with their lives. So even though it seems bad, he only did what he thought was best. It got worse and worse for Victor, and David saw it. Now it was David's job to show what was actually happening in the airline, how the social problems were taking a toll on Victor's mind. It's only because David helped was the airline able to survive, or else it would not have. The bad press got to the point that it had all eyes on Zara. "Is it true you can't handle the comments?" One person says. "I feel like the company is to blame. All she needs to do is be quiet and just act normal." The other states, the pressure was getting to Zara as well, and the new role put on her really did affect her. The auditorium was packed, the air thick with anticipation. News cameras lined the walls, their lenses focused on the podium. Victor Ellington, a man who usually exuded an air of quiet confidence, looked drawn, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He stood alone, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "Good morning," he began, his voice hoarse but resolute. "I'm here today to address the recent incident involving my daughter, Zara, on Ellington Airlines Flight 347. First, I want to apologize to Zara. No one, especially my own daughter, should ever experience what she did." A hush fell over the room. He continued, his voice gaining strength. "I also want to apologize to all our passengers, past and present, who may have experienced similar treatment. This incident was not an isolated case, but a symptom of a larger problem within our organization." He paused, taking a deep breath. "We have, for too long, allowed prejudice and bias to creep into our culture. We have prioritized appearances over substance, and we have failed to create a truly inclusive environment for both our employees and our passengers. That stops now." Victor then outlined a series of concrete steps Ellington Airlines would be taking to address the issue. He announced mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, from baggage handlers to executives. He pledged to review and revise the airline's policies, ensuring they were free from bias and discrimination. He committed to increasing the representation of minority groups in leadership positions. But it was his next announcement that truly stunned the room. "Effective immediately," he said, his voice ringing with conviction, "Ellington Airlines will be donating a significant portion of our profits to organizations that fight against prejudice and promote equality. We will also be establishing a foundation, in Zara's name, to provide scholarships and mentorship opportunities for underprivileged students." A collective gasp rippled through the room. This was more than just damage control. It was a genuine commitment to change. He did not want the problem to keep spiraling, and he would do everything to fix it. The reporters fired questions, their voices clamoring for answers. "Mr. Ellington, what about Claudia Harper? Was she fired?" "Yes, Miss Harper is no longer employed by Ellington Airlines," Victor replied, his voice firm. "However, I want to be clear. This is not just about one individual. It's about a system that allowed her behavior to occur. Mr. Ellington, do you believe your daughter was targeted because of her race?" Victor paused, his expression thoughtful. "I believe my daughter was targeted because of a combination of factors," he said. "Her race, her age, her appearance, all of which challenged certain people's preconceived notions of who belongs in first class." "Mr. Ellington, are you concerned about the financial impact of this scandal on your airline?" Victor shrugged. "My priority is not profits," he said. "My priority is doing what's right. If that means sacrificing some revenue in the short term, so be it. In the long run, I believe that doing the right thing will always be good for business." As the press conference drew to a close, Zara Ellington walked onto the stage. She stood beside her father, her eyes shining with pride. She held no anger. Her strength resonated with the crowd. "I know she has been wronged," Victor states, "and whatever it comes to, know that it's my job to make sure she always safe. Thank you all for being here," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I hope that this incident will serve as a catalyst for change. I hope that it will inspire us all to be more aware of our biases, to challenge injustice wherever we see it, and to create a world where everyone feels valued and respected." She then grabs the mic and states, "I want to thank you all, because I could not come out without everyone, and hope that everyone can move on." With that, she took her father's hand, and they walked off the stage together, leaving the world to grapple with their message. In the wake of the press conference, the world watched as Ellington Airlines underwent a transformation. The mandatory diversity and inclusion training was rigorous, challenging employees to confront their biases and examine their own behaviors. The airline partnered with community organizations to offer mentorship programs for underprivileged youth, providing them with opportunities they never thought possible. The Zara Ellington Foundation was established, offering scholarships to promising students from minority backgrounds, giving them a chance to pursue their dreams without the burden of financial hardship. But the most unexpected change came from Claudia Harper. After her dismissal, she retreated from public life, grappling with the consequences of her actions. She spent weeks in therapy and was at her lowest. Then one day she came across a news article about the Zara Ellington Foundation. Something clicked within her. She knew she couldn't undo the harm she had caused, but she could try to make amends. She contacted Victor Ellington, requesting a meeting. He was hesitant at first, but something in her voice convinced him to agree. The meeting was awkward, tense. Claudia apologized for her behavior, her voice filled with genuine remorse. She explained that she was a product of a system that had warped her perceptions and fueled her prejudices. She said she was willing to do whatever it took to try and right her wrongs. Victor listened, his expression unreadable. When she was finished, he said, "I appreciate your apology, Miss Harper, but forgiveness is not mine to give. That is something you need to earn through your actions." He then offered her a proposal. He wouldn't reinstate her to the airline, but he would give her a chance to volunteer for the Zara Ellington Foundation. It would be unpaid, demanding, and potentially humiliating work. But it would also give her an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to make a positive impact on the lives of others. Claudia accepted without hesitation. She spent months working with the foundation, mentoring students, organizing workshops, and advocating for equality. She was honest about her past, sharing her mistakes and what she had learned from them. The kids seemed to have grown on her, and to care for them was her daily responsibility. David also keeps in touch with Claudia, and has recorded most of the actions that she has been taking. It started with Claudia mentoring Zara. Now it was time for it to end with the same outcome. There was so much for both of them to offer each other. What was started as a fight turned to them sharing each other's struggle. They found common ground with each other and became a friend. Slowly, Claudia began to earn back the respect of the community. She wasn't fully forgiven, and she never would be, but she was given a second chance. A chance to prove that people can change, that even the deepest wounds can heal. Zara, meanwhile, thrived. She used her platform to advocate for social justice, speaking out against prejudice and inequality. She became a role model for young people from all walks of life, inspiring them to pursue their dreams and challenge the status quo. With everyone's support and action, She felt stronger than ever and made sure to live the best life possible. Years later, Zara stood on a stage, accepting an award for her work with the Zara Ellington Foundation. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes filled with gratitude. Beside her stood Victor, his face beaming with pride. As the day turns into night, Zara says, "I was in shock as to how all the people in the city have changed their mind, and what I wanted was all there." She had the life that she always wanted. The journey of Zara and Claudia offers potent life lessons. First, stand firm in your worth, even when challenged. Zara's initial reaction is a reminder to know and assert your value, regardless of external judgments. In real life, this translates to confidently pursuing opportunities, valuing your skills, and not letting others diminish your potential. Second, recognize that prejudice often stems from systemic issues. Claudia's actions, while wrong, revealed the pressure and biases inherent in certain structures. Apply this understanding by examining your own biases and challenging harmful systems around you, be it at work or in social circles. Third, true strength lies in how you respond to adversity. Zara's focus on her goals, even in the face of humiliation, showcases resilience. When faced with setbacks, refocus on your purpose and find healthy ways to channel frustration into positive action. Finally, transformation is possible with accountability and empathy. Claudia's journey towards redemption underscores the power of acknowledging mistakes and committing to change. Be willing to confront your flaws, make amends, and learn from your experiences. By embracing these lessons, you can navigate life's challenges with integrity, resilience, and a commitment to creating a more equitable world.